Welcome, magical ones, to an alchemical life, where our mission is to liberate humanity from limitation and suffering and bring magic back to the world. One moment, one life, one heartbeat at a time.
What I used to think was it was all God that did that. But what I'm coming more and more open to is this real identity piece that like the God is within us and we're fractals of that. For us to then go about like creating all these systems that shame us and think of like we need this like sacrifice to then purify us so then we can go to heaven. I'm like,
don't burn forever. Like a lot of the things that I went through with my mother, when I was in the middle of it, I thought it was normal. It's because what you're raised in. You have an idea. That's all coming from a wounded place. Mm-hmm. That's why our generation and the generations that come after us, there's such a privilege that we have.
But the deep fear of abandonment was planted young. You don't think that they're wrong, you think that you're wrong. I remember just writing down like, I'm not good. I was like, wow, this is like deep. I don't think I am good. I even knew that was a lie. I couldn't deny the fact that that was a really deep shadow that I had to work through.
Hello, magical humans. Welcome to An Alchemical Life. My name is Kira. I am your host, and I am here with the amazing Lucy. Lucy, I don't know that I actually know your last name.
People are like, is it Celebrates? So it's Wallace.
Okay, we were here with Lucy Wallace. We met in the whole Substack realms and have like just formed a really, really beautiful connection. And she is going to be here to share her story with us. So first of all, before I like officially introduce you, I just want to say thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
You're such a light, truly. Like you're the name of her publication. Well, I'll just tell you. Hold on. Here's the official thing, guys. Lucy is a Gene Keys guide, a brand strategist, storyteller, creator of the Intentional Planner, and a big dreamer, which she and I have in common. With her podcast and community, The Lightworkers Guide, she creates a space dedicated to connecting with the divine and how you were uniquely created to serve the world. As a business mentor and intuitive coach, Lucy guides you in refining your core messages and authenticity in who you be through the Gene Keys business application of human design and the art of manifesting your health, wealth, love, and leadership so you can attract your soul-aligned fractals. She believes you can manifest anything you desire and build a life and business aligned to your soul's purpose, one intentional day at a time.
Hey, that's me. Thank you so much for having me. It's going to be so much fun. I can feel it.
I'm so excited. So one of the reasons I really wanted to have this conversation with you is you do focus so much on the Gene Keys, which I do as well. Mm-hmm. And I've like name dropped it in a lot of my writing, but I haven't like actually gone into the system with my community and like really explained it. And so I'm excited to kind of hear your wisdom, and feels like almost like the first introduction of this system to my community.
Okay.
In like a more official way.
Yeah.
And before we get there, though, I'd really love to hear, you and I have some things in common. And this was part of where we actually met in a chat. And Lucy put in a little bit of her story. And I was like, wait, that's kind of my story, too. So I'd love for you to share with us your story of, because you started out in a more standardized religion, and then moved from that system to where you're now integrating Gene Keys and human design and some of these other things. We even talked about astrology.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear, just like your story, your journey with that, however you want to share it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I grew up kind of more Catholic. My parents were Italian, and so like the Roman Catholic, school system from kindergarten to high school. And we even had like my uncle was a priest, and he would come over and set up an altar in our living room. And my sisters and I would be underneath and like eating the Eucharist. And we're like, it's okay. It's not blessed yet. We can do this. But
wait, did you get the wine? Did you get the wine? Because without the wine,
all the adults had a lot of wine. There was no shame in drinking in my house. Like that was normal. Kind of always say and laugh about is I'm so grateful that they were lukewarm. Like, it was kind of part of the culture, but not really like coming from a place where God is judgmental or like for me, God was always loving and always there. And through Catholic, it's the same as Christianity as far as like Jesus and all of that. But I grew up like afraid of my parents and their judgment and their punishment. And it was never turned on God. So I am thankful for that because as I got older, I never had to decondition out of who I believe God is. And then part of my story, which we can get into like the parts that hurt and shame and stuff like that, but just going through the thread of religion, my parents got divorced when I was 15. I should say the second divorce. So my birth parents got divorced when I was really young. I was 2.5, 3 years old. Aww. And so the second set got divorced when I was 15, and both of them remarried to just non-denominational Christian people. So yeah, since they were kind of like, not like making them come with us to Catholic church, we went with them to just non-denominational Christian churches. And that's when I really started feeling more aligned. I'm like, this sounds like more of like what I believe. Like, I don't think I need to tell a priest, and have him and like pray all these things, just like repeat, and then I'm free. And, it just like felt more aligned even when I was 15. So, but even then, very, always felt like this spiritual connection, always felt very led by God, always felt like I had a purpose. Then when I got married, and this is where before we hit record, I was kind of sharing that part of my story there of like wanting to lean more into my faith. I was married to someone who I would ask like, let's go to church on Sundays. And he didn't want to go because it like interrupted. He wanted to go to the beach on Sundays. And like, he just didn't want to do like anything that required, any sort of schedule. And so I felt like there was this constant tension of like choosing to nurture my marriage, which was not good. I should just say it was really bad. And so it was like that versus like just trying to nurture myself and my own spirituality and what was drawing me to like want a closer relationship with whoever God might be,
Something bigger than you.
Yeah, exactly. And it just always came through that Christian lens and Jesus and everything like that. But I couldn't tell you a Bible verse really, or, like really explain anything. I just knew that was my faith. And so after we got divorced, Capri, my daughter, she was just 1.5 years old. And I felt like I could finally just like fully dive into everything that fascinated me and did so many different Bible studies and went to church and like small groups and even led a small group. And I mean, I loved the Bible. Like loved it. Like I remember thinking like, how come no one told me how beautiful this is? Like I truly loved it.
Wow.
And I was kind of able, now I can look back and see, and this is where we can kind of get into the gene keys and human design of like, one of the things that I can do is just like take what resonates and leave what doesn't. And so in human design, I have a very open head in Ajna. So like my like direct way of thinking is super like open-minded. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just like, whatever, I need to understand it. Like I just can believe and have faith. And like, I really came to know the character of who God is, or now we can just say divine. And some people say universe, and whatever it is, that's all just words. It's all of us trying to define this untangible thing that we know is higher. And that's what I always, even as a young child, always just connected with, knowing that was there. And the scripture, just the parts where God like spoke into my purpose. And it's mostly about Jesus. And Jesus says like, the power is within you, like over and over. And I was hearing those things and taking those things with me and leaving judgment out, and also just the original sin and all of this kind of stuff. And then with the birth of my own daughter, I'm like, she is the most pure, perfect being. Mm-hmm. Like there's nothing more pure and beautiful. We're all this, and then we get conditioned and go through life and have doubts and shame and all of these things that make us forget. And it's like, God does not, like, we are God's children. Like, that's what I was getting from the Bible. Like, that's how much he loves us. That's how he sees us.
Yeah.
And for us to then go about like creating all these systems that shame us and think of like, we need this like sacrifice to then purify us so then we can go to heaven. I'm like,
We don't burn forever.
yeah, condemning to hell. And I'm like, actually, that doesn't really align with who my relationship is with God, but
yeah,
everyone like can believe what they believe. Like, so I kind of just let all that other stuff go. But through my own business, I started really sharing about my faith. And so my business kind of grew from that as far as being a brand that shared about my faith. And that's when I started being introduced to different people who were also sharing about their faith and like really defining what being a Christian was. And so then I found myself censoring what I would say. I remember even like Halloween. Like, I can't post about Halloween because I'll be judged by people who think that's demonic. You know, stuff like that, where I found myself like shrinking back to fit this mold.
Yeah.
And I'm like, something's not aligned, but I, kind of let it kind of go. And then when I first heard about human design, and what I loved about it so much was that it was introduced as like, take what resonates and leave what doesn't.
Wow.
This isn't truth. This isn't supposed to be like indicate, like, this is not who you are. For me, it gave me the freedom to like look at this and not it be in conflict with my faith.
Yeah.
So that opened the door. And when I read it and learned just first about my own design and how like every piece of it was this like thing of, I heard God be like, you always knew this about yourself. You always knew this about yourself, and then when I learned more about it, because I'm the type, like, if I'm fascinated about something, I go all in. I'm like, let me learn everything about it. And
you and I have that in common.
I'm like, even before this call, I was like going down other rabbit holes. I'm like, I have to get ready. I'm just like, I lose time. Forget we'll go into projector and all like the things like that. But, and like, so I'll just tell you at first, I am a projector, splenic projector, and kind of on the surface level, what they tell you is like, I'm not designed to do things. If like, I just want to rest and take naps.
Yeah.
And I was like, I never take naps, but I'm like, maybe I should. The little key piece about this is when you are aligned in doing something you love, it doesn't feel like work. The work part is like doing stuff that you don't really like to do. You need like a projector needs to like really limit that, because I'll just burn myself out.
Yeah.
So, tangent. We can go more into human design.
Yeah, I would like to.
So that led me to find the Gene Keys and and I wanted to know everything that I could about Richard Rudd and like his process and how he came to have this divine download himself. And I learned that he actually was under Ra Uru Hu, who was the founder of human design. And Richard Rudd really loves the I Ching. And in human design, all the numbers on the side coincide with the Gene Keys. So those are your gates. And then Richard kind of took them and like, made these sequences. And then through the I Ching, the language of that and like those definitions, then that was born the Gene Keys. And when I read the Gene Keys, to me, it was like beautiful poetry. And just like, how can you take 5 pages to define one word? It just like, just like the vastness of it. My mind just like starts like telling the stories of how I can relate to it. And then kind of being empowered, like this is actually one of my gifts. And how can I bring this out into my life and like really use this?
You know, one of the things I really love about his system is like in the very beginning of the book, he says there are no gurus here. Like
Yeah.
my entire intention is for you to be your own guru,
Yes.
to be your own leader. And so when even when you're reading those words, it's so woven into the transmission that you're gonna define it for yourself,
Right.
you know?
Yes.
And that I think is what makes it such a, and I haven't studied human design as much as you have, so I can't speak to that system as much, but this one in particular like really feels so alchemical. Like I
Yeah.
was saying on that thing again yesterday, where it's like just by interacting with it, just by taking in the information and getting to know my keys and allowing that the vibration and the words to be activated within my being,
Yeah.
then I started to become aware of things and I started to see shadows, but then I also started to see gifts, and things just start changing and transforming when you
Yeah.
interact with the system in a way that's like so beautiful.
So beautiful.
I'm so curious though, like what was the actual first introduction? So like you're in the church
Yeah.
and
Okay.
like how did he come in?
So this goes back to being kind of in my business, and I was in a mastermind, and in that was introduced to like doing digital courses and things like that, and like thinking of ways, because I had already written a 10-week study on discovering your purpose, and I called it Illuminate. And I wanted to write a book or like a small group study with it, was my whole thing. And then being in this mastermind, I was like, ooh, maybe I can make this a course, because this is like what everyone's doing, you know? And then through that, just kind of, I was in another, not, it wasn't a mastermind, but like a group coaching thing where a coach came on and introduced her, like she was coaching us and then said, if you like my work, you have to go listen to the life coach school. And I was like, again, rabbit hole. And then I loved, so the life coach school, Brooke Castillo, it's all about, it's like cognitive behavioral therapy basically, but she created what's called a model, and like it's all about how your thoughts create your emotions and drive your actions, and those are your results. So it's like manifestation broken down in a process. She doesn't use the words manifestation, but I was like,
Manifestation.
yeah, if you want to
Totally.
have a result, you have to go back to what you're thinking, because that's driving everything. And so of course I start going down a lot of manifestation and neural manifestation and all that kind of stuff. But I was listening to a podcast from one of her students, and she had this human design coach on her podcast.
Okay.
And so just from her speaking about human design, I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like everything wrapped into one that I love. It's like business and spirituality and purpose and like all these things. And so I was like, rabbit hole. Okay, let's dive in. And I ended up hiring her as my business coach.
Wow. Okay.
And part of her, she called it the wealth codes. And she does now, but in the beginning, she didn't mention they were gene keys. She just said that she had these codes and you had to work with her to find them out. Yeah. So I did. And then I came to find out, I'm like, oh, this is the prosperity sequence. Got it. So I actually did the prosperity sequence first, because that's kind of how I was introduced to it. But then wanting to learn everything about the gene keys, I did go back and through the activation sequence. And then I became a guide while I was going through Venus, because I just really, being a guide, being a projector, my life's work is a 7, which has got the gift of guidance. So I just felt it. Like I already had this pull to like coaching, and so I just felt like everything was coming together in that.
Yeah.
And then, so I started basically where the Venus sequence ends, in your core, but it was from the vocation lens. And after going through it through that, that way, and kind of ending back at my core, I saw it through such a different lens.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah. And I'm currently going through the Star Pearl right now, which as guides, we're kind of being asked to not really bring it out and teach it yet, because like Richard Rudd is still kind of going through it too.
Mhm.
So it's still under transmission. He says like, do one spear a month. And I'm 2 months in and I'm still just lingering on the first one. I'm just like, and he does say that at first, like, take your time, take a month, but you kind of naturally want to just like go through all of it and like learn everything you can.
Totally. I struggled with that so much. I did the Venus sequence first.
Uh-huh.
And I struggled with that so much and actually I started down with the purpose, but I totally skipped to my core. Which for everybody out there, this is like the beginning of, I was started at the beginning of the sequence, but then I skipped to the one at the end, which is like the most tender. But I was like, I need to know this.
Yeah.
And I remember, I can so relate to what you're sharing because I remember reading my core and just like sobbing. It was like my entire life made sense all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And everything that I've gotten to alchemize and to work through, and the things that are extremely challenging for me, all contained in that one key.
Yeah.
So the fact that you started there also and went all the way around.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed. I'm so let's just stay with that thread for a second. Like yours is, remind me, what's your core?
It's precision.
That's right, which is 62?
Yes.
Okay. What was that journey like for you? Like maybe walk people through a little bit, like what it actually looks like to interact with.
Yeah. Okay. So starting there, thinking it through, how can I use this in my business is where I was coming from at the beginning. And the shadow is intellect. And when you just see the words, he even says like, this is one of those shadows. When you look at it, you don't think of it as a shadow, but it's basically about trying to just express yourself through facts. This is where I see it, is especially trying to introduce the gene keys to my audience who are very, very Christian and against anything that wasn't biblical truth, And so I was just like, I felt myself needing to over explain it and like do all the research and like, trust me, like, I did all the research for you. Like, it's
not going to suck you down into hell. I promise.
Yeah, I promise. And really going it from the scientific lens. And that's where I kind of was like, astrology makes sense to me. Of course, God created this. But then the precision part, as I was listening to it, I was like, this is like our world, God, the universe, everything is so precise and so beautiful, but in this like precise, deliberate way is kind of how I saw that. But then it's like, how do you do that in business? I'm like, I don't know. But I felt this call of like, I can let go of facts and trying to explain things and just get to the heart, because that's really what it is. It's like getting to the heart, to the place where you almost don't need words. And because the feeling comes out regardless of what you say. So it's like,
what I feel with that key, you can tell me if this resonates. What I feel with that key is it's almost the essence of creation, because it's almost like the force that actually puts all the little pieces together.
Yeah.
And so it draws them together in such precision and in such harmony. And when I listen to or read that key, I always just feel like, oh, this is like the thing that pulls it. Like, this is why we have matter. Like, I can hit this thing and I can touch my body.
Right.
It's that suction,
Uh-huh.
which with your, as you mentioned before, like and I know guys, like we don't have a chart up, and so we're talking about a lot of technical things, but just go with us.
Yeah.
And you can, like, I'm going to link Lucy's site. There's also like a free masterclass on my site. So if you're curious, like there's like stuff you can go into.
Join our rabbit holes.
And like, in a little bit, I want to get to like why this is so important for people. But anyway, like what I see with your precision and that ability to be that creative force, that matched with having like guidance as your life's work, which again, if I'm remembering it correctly, I think in that key, he says something about how like you're meant to be almost like the intermediary. You're the guide who helps groups work together, and not to create a hierarchy, but you're empowering everyone.
Yes.
And so that's such a beautiful marriage right there.
Yeah, I felt that too. And the guide is not a leader. It's not in front of the crowd. It's kind of behind and pushing energy. And for me, this is where it kind of brings in the projector, because it is about being invited into it. And it's so important to feel like having discernment, which is the programming partner, discernment of who invites me and who I invite in. And because like the work is going to be deep, and I see you and hear you, and it's more about, I take it as I just create a space for you to deeply connect with yourself and then lead yourself. Yeah, because I'm not doing any of the leading here. It's just about finding that internal guidance for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, when you started to, there's like so many different directions I want to go. When you started to come out and you started presenting human design and Gene Keys, did you get pushback?
I definitely did. One of the ones that I was surprised about was using the word manifestation in my I did a post on Instagram, and a friend of mine called me and said that she was really worried about me. And knowing her, I knew it was coming from like deep within her. She really was worried about me. So I listened to her, but I also knew like I had to let that go, because I'm like, even the word manifestations in the Bible, like, like we do have this power within us. But she was arguing with me of like, she's more of the theory that like everything's predestined and God ordains all of our steps. And it's like, we don't really have the authority to do that for ourselves, which I never aligned with.
Wow.
So that's why, it's just like no point in arguing with her. I wanted to just kind of say how it might be working for me. And if then someone was interested, they could come to me and ask me more questions. But I wasn't going to be like, you have to try this, or, trust me on this one. So I felt very careful, and I felt very divided, which is the shadow, of actually, division. It's the shadow.
Yes.
Yeah. I felt completely divided in my own, and like that, we can go into astrology, which you know a lot more than me. But what I learned from the human design language is that 70% of our energy
Yes.
is,
The sun.
so that was like one of my biggest things. And felt so divided, and I was inconsistent with my messaging and all of these things, which when you just think about the sun is nothing but consistent, shining brightly in who the sun is. It doesn't try to imitate, it doesn't try to do anything except be what it does. And it just gives. That's the sun's energy. And so I was noticing that shadow in myself. So just being aware of it, and then getting brave to really let everything go. And it wasn't that long ago. It was only, I'm going to say, like December, January. So it was just a few months ago that I really decided to close that business down that I had created. And I wrote a letter to my audience and just said, like, this is where I'm going. And I do welcome you, but if you don't want to come, I respect you, because I know that it might conflict with what you want to hear, and that's fine. But I had to burn it all down. I had to. So, and that is exactly why I joined Substack with zero. I'm like, I want to come to a new space that doesn't know me, that I can just be unapologetically myself and still learn and still like develop this offer, and without thinking about like I still need to please someone else. Just like really create it for what it is. And so, I mean, it's been the most fun and freeing, and I've like fallen back in love with my business again.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, the feeling like you have to explain yourself to someone, because I resonate with that a lot. I've definitely had those head trips.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that came from certain things in your childhood, in your past? Did it come from the religious system, a combination of both?
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting in what I learned in human design, and you and I both share this. It's about the only thing we share in our charts. When I put our side by side, our centers are exactly opposite, except this one center for both of us is undefined. And it is our ego. It's basically our will. And the shadow of that is feeling like we have to prove ourselves because we don't feel worthy. Like our innate shadow is, because it's undefined, we don't have that consistent energy of just our worthiness in us. And so who comes in and out of our lives, it's like we're trying to gain it from outside of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that, like through the human design lens, it just resonated so much because I feel that like that unworthiness has been like one of my deepest pain points.
Same here.
Yeah. And we can kind of see like how our stories and our traumas and everything affected that, where maybe if we had that defined will and ego, it wouldn't have affected us so much.
Yes.
Because everybody has a story and has things they deal with, and it just kind of impacts different places in our lives. But for you and I, because I know it does resonate with you, like that is just a deep wound for us.
100%. I mean, you and I actually, it's interesting. You've been doing your business for much longer than I have. Like I just started in like February, but we started on Substack very, very, very close together. And nothing has triggered my unworthiness like this journey. Like it's fascinating to me because there's a lot of years where I think I was so much in survival mode that I almost couldn't deal with unworthiness.
Mm-hmm.
And recently I've gotten to the place where I'm like solid enough I'm like, okay, I can start this business and I can do these things. Cause I had a business this is my story. We'll do that another episode, but quick is I had a business about 10 years ago, walked away from it and have spent 10 years like really just pursuing my art and discovering myself for reasons that I will share later. The reason I mention that is like now that I've come back to this like solidity and now that I'm solid, it's like I don't know if you can resonate with this, but it's like now I can see all the unworthiness where before it was maybe just so much shame. I think I was dealing with a lot of shame for a long time. And now it's like, oh, well, this is presenting itself to me, but I'm equipped to handle it.
Yeah.
Because I do have these tools, I have the self-understanding to be able to, which actually didn't know that about the ego center, but I've seen it, for instance, in my Chiron and Taurus, which is also kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, yeah, I'd love for you to maybe, if you wouldn't mind, maybe sharing some of your story, like what did happen in childhood that kind of affected that. And because one of the things that I'm most passionate about and what we really do in this space and what you do in your space, I call it the true self. You use words like authenticity and that kind of thing, but it's really coming back to that, how you were designed, and let's peel away all the conditioning and you just get to be you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it really helps people to hear stories about where and how that conditioning gets put in place and the effect that it has on us, and then what it takes to unwire it, because then they can apply that in their own lives.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd love to share. I'm like, I was born in New Jersey, but we moved to California when I was 2. When we moved here, my younger sister was born. It was very, very soon after she was born that my parents got divorced. And in that time, apparently, it was a really bad custody battle, a lot of court, but my dad won custody of us. And in those times, it was kind of unheard of. Like it was just assumed everybody goes with their mom.
Yeah.
My dad won custody, and that's when he remarried to a Cuban lady, and her name's Teresa, and she already had a daughter. So she has an older daughter. So I was born first, but kind of raised as a middle child. And then my mom remarried to someone else. But growing up in this new home, my mom would come and pick up my younger sister and I every other weekend to visit with her. When I was 5, one weekend she didn't bring us back. So she kidnapped my sister and I with her new husband and took us. And back then the internet wasn't around. There was no GPS. There was no way to, find us other than my dad quitting everything, hiring detectives, to do everything he could to find us. And it's crazy because now, like, as a mom, I can't think of anything more horrible, like even an hour of that. But it was 3 months. I have a lot of memories of it. Who she married he was like a Texas guy. I just have memories of him in like a cowboy hat and just kind of like smoking and drinking. And we would be in a pickup truck with a horse trailer behind it. And there were sometimes he wouldn't let us stop. And I had to go to the bathroom in the horse trailer. And I'd be laying down and passing by, and I would see signs of like, ooh, this one has cable TV. Can we go to that one, please? Can we go?
Wow.
And so I remember that. I remember being in a hotel one time and there was like 2 beds, my mom and him in one, porn on the TV. And my mom saying, Steve, like, she's like, and he was like, they don't know what's going on. But I did know what was going on. I could see that and but still so young to not really comprehend it. And I have a vivid memory of me trying to pick up the phone because I did know my parents' phone number, my dad's side, and I tried to call it and it rang and Steve came up and grabbed and he hung it down. And years later, I talked to my Cuban stepmom who she was describing a time and she said, I knew it was you on the other line. I'm like, it was me on the other line. I was trying to call you guys, but I don't remember ever feeling afraid. I didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
But I just knew it wasn't right. Like something was off.
Yeah.
But
were you guys traveling that whole time? Were you like, wow.
Yeah, traveling the whole time. And we were in Texas when all of a sudden Steve grabbed my sister and I and ran us into this room and told us to get in the bathroom and like closed the shower curtains and was like pointing down at us to keep our mouths shut. Don't say anything. And all of a sudden we hear pounding on the doors and the police broke the doors down, got us, took us away. And then my mom and his name was Steve, were arrested in front of us. I don't really remember too much about how much time passed, but I do remember being with psychologists that had us draw, and like just analyzing us, but we were okay. Like I was drawing pictures of houses and trees and stuff like that. Apparently I wasn't really harmed physically, but just that started the toll,
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then she did end up going to jail, and after she was out, then it was like supervised visitation with a social worker was allowed. And then it turned into a family member. And then it gradually turned into we could then just visit her on our own. And this is where I think my dad was just like such a saint to allow that, the trust he had to have. But he did. And then in that time, my mom ended up having 4 other kids.
Whoa.
Yeah, 2 sets of twins, and they're 11 months apart. So I had 4 new half brothers and sisters, and they were, so young. I was 12 now, and they were, I met them when they were about 2 and 3. And then we were visiting with them again. Now, it was a few years later, and then she got arrested in front of us again for something else. And that was like, I did really remember that. I think when we talked on mine, you asked me something about like, was there pressure put on me to kind of fit like a role of like,
yeah, well, you have a Capricorn moon. And so I was asking you if you felt over responsible or like you had to take care of everyone as a child.
Yes. That was it. So I called my sister right after and I told her everything we talked about. And then it was just like reminding me of even in that moment, because they put us in this place. They like put powder on us to delouse us. And my 4 new brothers and sisters were still in cribs, and they were in a room just like lined with cribs. And they were each in one, and they were crying. And I was like, going from crib to crib, like seeing if they were okay. And and then again, it was like the time for my dad to drive to get us. We were in California, but it was 4 hours away. So not Texas travel, but it still was a good 4 or 5 hours. And ever since, my dad kind of always put the pressure on me to take care of my sister, even though we're only 18 months apart. It was just this like responsibility for her. But I didn't really, I don't know, I just kind of didn't take it all that seriously. But now I can see that it was put on me. And, yeah.
It's crazy how that works. Like a lot of the things that I went through with my mother when I was in the middle of it, I thought it was normal. Like you're saying, of like I didn't take it that seriously. It's because
Right.
that's what you're raised in. You have
Right.
no idea
Right.
that this is not actually healthy,
Yeah.
and your parents don't, wouldn't. Yeah, it's all coming from a wounded place. But it's just so fascinating. I think that's why our generation and the generations that come after us, there's such a privilege that we have of having access to this information and the ability to go in and do some of this shadow work and really alchemize those situations and learn from them, because there was not that awareness 20, 30
Right.
years ago.
Right.
Like our parents were just winging it.
Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. And truly doing the best they could and, had their own shadows and their own programming. And I always felt that. And if anything, I was never mad at my mom. I've just felt a sorrow for her.
Probably just missed her.
Yeah. And I missed her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I missed that relationship. Because even though I had this replacement, so to speak, with my dad's new marriage through up until 15, I felt like I did have a mother figure that was very, very loving, but it just still, it's just not quite the same, especially when I could see how she was with her own daughter in our home. I could, there just was a difference. But to this day, I have such a deep relationship. I call her mom. She's in my life. And so there was a lot of, beautiful parts. I always felt like I had some sort of, like, I don't know, I was just held through these things. But the deep fear of abandonment was planted young.
Yeah.
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 And then when you're children, you don't think that they're wrong, you think that you're wrong. So like that deep unworthiness, I remember just writing down, like, do you remember when people like I'm enough like came out and I am, and I'm good, and people were writing like I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And I was like, I'm not good. Like I felt myself stopping there. I was like,
Wow.
this is like deep where I don't think I am good, And I even knew that was a lie, but I couldn't deny the fact that that was a really deep shadow.
Yeah.
That I had to work through a lot.
Yeah. And I can resonate with that so much. Yeah. Like, and I guess that is the worthiness piece, feeling deeply like there has to be something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I love that you pointed out that when we're kids, we make it about ourselves.
Yeah.
Because like, it sounds like both of us have gone through like a lot of just chaos in childhood. And that chaos, and that especially when a parent leaves. My mom she would emotionally distance herself from me and like shut herself behind a door and refuse to talk to me. So there was that kind of, like mini abandonment. My dad, they got a divorce and he left when I was a baby. So there was, I resonate with the abandonment piece. And I feel like that in and of itself is such a seed for, aside from the fact that we have an undefined ego.
Yeah.
And this is where it's so interesting too to look at these systems and be like, well, Jesus, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Like,
Right.
I have this life experience because I created this package for myself,
Right.
or
Yeah. Or
I respond to the life experience the way that I did because of the programming.
yeah.
Which, I mean, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I tend to think that like I drafted it all. Like I do believe we make the plan before we come down here.
Yes.
But I'm curious, like, do you feel that way as well?
Yeah. Like I find it fascinating to think that we have like these soul contracts with ourselves and we chose our parents, and to think that my daughter chose me and everything that's going to come with that will help her in her life and what she's going to have to work through. And, and what I used to think was it was all God that did that. But, or I should say, and, what I'm coming more and more open to is this real identity piece that like the God is within us and we're fractals of that. And so it's like, yes, and,
Yes.
yeah, it's not just me by myself choosing this, but it is like the oneness of it all.
Yes.
Like the interconnectedness of us all.
Yes. What that really alludes to that I love is the idea, honestly, that like all of this, I love the term that we're a fractal of God, because then you can see, when you see fractals, they repeat, but it's from this one source point. And I love the, like what you just touched on of this idea of oneness, like it's all happening simultaneously. And if I'm choosing it, then it means someone else is choosing it, or God is choosing it, or because it's all consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've heard some say, like, as I've been deconstructing and everything, like, this is all like the whole experience is consciousness learning about itself.
Right. Right.
So yes, there's that, like, I think of it as source. You mentioned like universe, God, creator, like whatever, there is this starting point, right? But then from that starting point, it's like the Big Bang, and all of these different fractals and representations of consciousness have been created. And even though they look so different, there's this unity that weaves us all together.
Yes.
Which happens to be your radiance.
Right. Yeah. So I've definitely dived into that. And when you were speaking, it reminded me of just the pieces that I am choosing to bring with me from Christianity or faith or whatever. Like there was a lot of beautiful things that came from that. So I don't need to reject the entire system, but I'm still taking those pieces with me. And one of those things is like woven together. I used to write that down all the time. Like everything's woven together for good. Like good.
I love that verse.
Yeah. That verse is just like, everything that's happening, I still trust in this goodness that's going to always be there, And so I'm still taking that with me, and it does shape how I even read the Gene Keys. I just read it through that lens, and it's just expanded it so much more. So I think, yeah, it's just so beautiful. And you were speaking about, the thing about creation is like, it's in different parts of my chart, and it's definitely in that second key, and it's in the first key, which is also my purpose. So it's like this nice, and over and over, it's this like before you get to the gift, it's like really resting in the pause,
in the shadow,
like this really, like before you can create anything, there's like a deep stillness of being, and that it's just being. It's the one is like the masculine, and the two is the ultimate feminine. And so it's like, and Richard says it's like the conundrum of the Gene Keys is like the two should have been one.
100%. Yes.
Everything's birthed and started from the two, from that energy of just trusting and receiving and being. And that is like, yeah, when I feel like most aligned and most deeply in trust with everything, is just being that.
Yeah. Well, I always think of those two keys as like the two being almost like the black hole. And then the one being that white hole that comes from the black hole. Yeah. That is like the expression of matter, but everything is gestated in the womb. Everything is gestated in that black hole of creation. I'm so curious because I have the 14 as my purpose. And so I feel like I feel the one. Sometimes I've had those moments of entropy. And so just asking for a friend. It's like how you experience them. Do you ever have those moments where it's like, wow, I just got nothing, dude?
Absolutely. All the time. And before reading the Gene Keys and even human design, I would get really frustrated with myself. and not feel like I was equipped enough. Or my shadows is like, what else do I need to learn? Or like, what other course, like, I need to go out there and find something. But really, and that this is what I just wrote about even yesterday about, because we were in this addiction,
Yeah.
like that thing in the shadow is just like trying to do other things to fill that void when it's truly just resting. And it's hard to do when you're used to doing.
Yep. And our
It's
whole culture, like programs, our culture is so yang overall anyway.
yes. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so for me, it's just this huge permission slip to just focus on if it's rest and truly doing nothing, but also like what else will fuel my soul and like what is just good for me. And it's always after that something, an insight comes, creativity comes, or it is like least expected. You can't force it. But when you're in a creative field where it's kind of your job, it's like, I need to force it, right? Like I need to have this come through.
Totally. Because it's like, well, copy's got to be written.
Right. Right. Yeah. And so what I've found is, since for me it does ebb and flow, to really hone when it's flowing and not dismiss it, not, put it second. It's like that's my time to really put down other things and follow that creative spark, because it might be gone again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
It's that waiting, it's the procrastination. It's that is another shadow of just like, just like waiting for tomorrow, when it's like you have to seize the moment when it's there, and when it's not, it's not.
And trusting that,
Trusting that.
Yeah.
Deeply trusting. Yeah.
Yeah. That takes so much trust
Yeah.
to trust that it will come back,
Right.
because I don't know about you, but when I get into those places, it's like, oh my God, like,
Mhm.
I don't know. It feels so empty
Yeah.
that it's disturbing.
Yeah. Actually, this is something that I wanted to ask you about, because in human design, your head and ajna they're defined. They're
Mhm.
consistent. So, and that's like how you get inspiration and also how you turn it into something. So turn it into a thought, like, so where does your creativity or inspiration come from? Like, do you have like rituals or places or?
Yeah. That's such a good question. I would definitely say my creativity comes from my connection with the divine. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so for my third eye and my crown to be defined makes a lot of sense,
Yes.
because a lot of times, and I have that key of devotion as my life's work, right?
Mhm.
So the way I approach my work is often, what do you want me to do?
Uh-huh.
And I'm working with that because I recognize some of that comes from having come from the church, believing that I can
Right.
make decisions.
Right.
And so
Right.
there's a balance to that. And yet, devotion is my life's work. Like, there is a
Mhm.
part of me that is wired to be devoted to something outside of myself.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because that key is a Leo Virgo key. So it's got that
Mhm.
Virgo flair of Virgo is very devoted to the divine,
Uh-huh.
very.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes it comes from seeking, like, okay, what is the higher will? I've just changed my perspective now from it being God.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm in conversation with my higher self. And I'm like, okay, you've got the plan.
Mm-hmm.
So what wants to come through?
Yeah.
Even when I was in the church, I remember very clearly I was in the bathroom and I remember getting in the shower and like just weeping and saying, I just want to be an open channel. Like, I just want to be an open channel for you to come through to others.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with that being my greatest desire, then I do my best
Yeah.
to channel those ideas. But that can, when it's not coming, you know,
Yeah.
then it's like, well, shit, what do I do?
Yeah.
And that can lead to some frustration.
Mm-hmm.
I have to wrestle with that shadow of half-heartedness where it's a bit of my procrastinating and
Yeah.
waiting for inspiration when I could actually just take action because I have devoted myself to my business, for instance, or my creativity. And I'm just going to have to trust that what comes through is what's just meant to come through.
Yep. Yep.
So that's a big journey for me
Yeah.
consistently. I will say for me, like surefire things to help are hiking,
Mm-hmm.
getting out in nature, and getting away from the cell phone.
Uh-huh.
And not even like actively thinking about my creativity, but
Uh-huh.
just I'm engaging with nature. And I mean, downloads for fantasy trilogies have come through when I'm hiking and like all kinds of stuff.
Uh-huh.
That's a surefire way for me. And then journaling is also a really, really good way for me,
Uh-huh.
because it allows that flow.
Yeah.
And meditation is like a must, or I would be insane. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm just smiling so big because when you said hiking, so part of your is this idea of mountains is kind of your environment, and it's like being up, having a view, like you do get great inspiration in those places. So just like tapping into even that, I find it so funny that you said the first thing was hiking, because it's like, yes, of course, like that is actually what is going, like you're in the right environment when you're in those higher places.
Yeah, totally. And it's so interesting because, like, I live close to the ocean.
Uh-huh.
I have to have the water,
Uh-huh.
but it's for a different reason. That's not
Yeah.
where I go to get creative.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
I really need to work shit out. I go take a hike.
Yes. I'm the same in as far as the water. I remember thinking like I love to go work at the beach, and every time I go to the beach, the last thing I want to do when I get there is work. Like I
Exactly.
bring my laptop every time, and every time I don't open it because it's just that's not it. And for me, it's called markets, which is kind of a strange term, but it's just about being in a marketplace that's like a coffee shop, where there's like transactions happening. There's a lot of activity.
That's your environment.
That's my environment.
Love that.
So I've always, even since college, like when I could go study somewhere on my own, coffee shops is always where I went. And the more crowded they are, the better. If they're empty, I'm like, I can't be here. I need like a lot of life happening around me. And I can zone it all out, and I get the most focused and the most work done. I know.
Oh, and you're a 2-4. Aren't twos kind of social? Or no, the 2 is the hermit line. The
The
4
two,
is
yeah. The 4 is the networker, which you and I both share. And the 2 is, I don't love this language that in the traditional human design, like hermit, but it just, I like that alone time is really important for me. And it almost like all the other parts of my design help even that. Like I need to be by myself, even in the gene keys, like having that rest and that downtime is so important for me to go out and do everything else I want to do.
yeah.
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 I know. It's fascinating.
It is so fascinating.
I know. And you are a 6-4. Do you want to hear like a little piece of that?
I would love to. Anything you want to share with me? I am so down, especially human design. I know nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the things too, going back to your centers, and because your head and ajna are defined and very consistent, but your throat is undefined. And that just means that when you do speak, your words, like people respond to your words. And so, and that will, like, not feeling like your words are going to be good enough, or not thinking your ideas are going to be good enough. So you're not getting it out. And you hit on it when you said, like, you just have to trust that what's coming through is what's meant to. And that is exactly your throat, like, exactly your throat. So, and your throat is the manifestation center. And so, speaking things out into existence. So even though your voice isn't consistent energy, when it does come through from this aligned, like your emotional state is, you've waited after the wave, you have clarity. And then when you speak, it will be very, very powerful. So you can fully trust that.
I love that.
Yes.
Thank you. Because that is, I mean, every time I go to write a post, it's like, oh God,
Mhm.
what am I going to say?
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
beautiful.
And you can trust that. And you might think like one of the shadows for that throat is just thinking like, I need to think about what I'm going to say. So you're overthinking about it, or you're thinking like you need to prepare for what you're going to say when actually you don't. You're not designed to. Like
Okay.
you can fully trust the moments that like what comes out will be Like when you're aligned, like all the other pieces are kind of in place, like you can trust. Otherwise, it might feel like you're trying to talk too much and you're just like just trying to get stuff out when it's not coming from like your center.
Yeah, I have a lot of moments from school when I can think of times. I used to be, there were two girls in our class that like, because this was right after COVID. So we were having class on Zoom.
Uh-huh.
And I remember it being me and this other girl who like constantly raised her hand. We were the first person to raise her hand anytime that there was a question. And I've since recognized, like, I've just calmed down and I don't need to do that as much. But there were a couple of things like what you just said about the throat, and also I'm a Leo sun. So, like, but I definitely know that energy. Like, I can feel it now. If it's not coming from a grounded place, then I'm just like, I don't want to talk.
Right.
I don't want to say anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
So you can trust that. Like,
Okay.
I'm not meant to say anything right now. And then, especially when you're asked a question and you feel like that is like you respond as a generator, like you respond to things. So it's almost like you don't need to come up with anything new. Just allow inspiration to come and respond to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and then what were we gonna? I mean, we can the 6. What I love about it is how the gene keys then has these same numbers for every single key, So it's like, but once you get it from the human design language, they all kind of follow the same pattern.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the 6s are the role model. And your first 30 years of life, you operate like a 3, which is a lot of trial and error. A lot of bumping into things. You're learning from mistakes. You feel the shadow of that is you don't want to try again because you're so afraid of failure. And so that's the first 30 years. And then you're in this space now where you're kind of like stepping back, like you're up on the roof, your mountains, looking over everything and kind of taking things in, analyzing what you've learned. And then it's not till 50 and beyond that you kind of reach your peak and you come down off the roof and you're ready to share your wisdom. And it comes from this place of like, you really know what you're talking about. And that's why it's called the role model, because people really do like look up to you for your wisdom because you have gone through all these things, but you've also stepped back to really analyze it and integrate the wisdom so that you can share it. Yeah. And what's so interesting about my chart, and this is where in business, this is kind of how I take some of these pieces. It's the North Node, which is from astrology, but it's like on the human design thing too. It's the line are the people that you are aligned to work with. And mine are 6s, and yours is a 2, which is neat. Isn't that funny? So I have a lot of 6s in my chart of like these people that are around me are all these. So my 30s, even though I kind of felt like my life was a little bit of a mess, but everyone else's was too. Like everyone was trial and error everything. But there's all these 6s in my life right now, and they're meant to be. Yes. So in marketing, we want to talk business.
Yeah.
Knowing that you, like 2s are attracted to you. 2s are the natural. They kind of like, they're not sure why it comes easy to them. It just does. It's just in their nature. And so me being a 2, like my shadow is not even recognizing that I would even get paid for what comes so easily to me. So I try and like learn other things or do other things when I'm just like in my own naturalness is like when I'm most magnetic.
Yeah.
So it's like speaking to me and that like giving me permission to lean into what I am just naturally good at.
Which is my jam. Like, I believe.
Totally. That's why it's so awesome.
It's so great that they match.
And for me, it's just like, talking to you is, and the thing, and I think you touched on it. It was either in another podcast that I just listened to or we spoke about of like, these people are ahead of their time. Like they're so like, they can see above it. And that's you. Like you just see above things. And so you're just like kind of in the future. So it's like speaking to that, like, I should just ask you, how do you like right now?
How would I like to be spoken to? That's a great question. I think for me, like I am, it's in my gene keys. It's in my human design. I'm also an Aquarius rising, which is very future oriented. So oftentimes I don't consciously think this, but I feel like I'm a year or 2 ahead of everybody where it's like not in knowing, but
Uh-huh.
just in feeling where we're meant to be
Right.
and the kind of humans that we're meant to be.
Right.
So I think like what really appeals to me is when something is future oriented. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you're drawing a picture for me of how life will look
Uh-huh.
and how, you know, if it's on a personal level or on a global level, whatever the message happens to be. But if I'm getting a picture into the, you know, working with this system or doing this is actually going to create this kind of result and environment, then I'm like,
Uh-huh.
ooh, let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
All the marketers take note with the sixes. I love hearing because there's so many different ways you can kind of take it, but it's the best when you hear it from a line six themselves because this is you, you know. I can try and interpret it all day long, but
Mhm.
coming from you directly that's the power.
Yeah. I think the way that I recognize the line six is showing up for me, because I've got, I think, 4 in my Gene Keys chart, 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the other thing that just came to me that I would say about sixes is there's a lot of responsibility. Like we very much, and again, this is also an Aquarius thing. We very much feel like I came to change the world. You
Right.
know, like
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of, because I have gone through the shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally resonated with what you were saying about being in this period where I'm analyzing and I'm sifting and I'm integrating,
Mm-hmm.
and from that is being born this like, okay, like let me prepare a way so that you don't have to learn the way that I did.
Right.
Because it was so hard.
Yeah.
And so I think like if you can tap into there's a real desire to serve. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
in the 4 and the 6.
Yep.
Is like a very big desire to serve
Yes.
humanity or a larger cause.
Uh-huh. Isn't that part of like, where do you have 8 again?
I have 8 as my radiance.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there was something that I read, some little line about that of like our lives will feel mediocre if we're not in service to the whole or to the world or to something. It's like, and I'm like, that hits it, right? Like that mediocrity, like just our lives won't feel like meaningful without that level of service.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Someone said to me once about the 8 that if you're also, it's a little different than what you said, but I'm giving
Mhm.
this because this 8 is your pearl.
Yeah. Right.
And he said, if like seeing humanity and loving every single reflection
Mm,
and loving all the differences and all the like, when you're really, really loving every expression of humanity,
yeah.
that's when you're your happiest.
I love that.
Because that is, it's an outward looking way, but
Uh-huh.
that is the essence of that key, is like nobody should be the same. You know?
Right.
Like we're all so different.
We're
And if you can love, which is kind of that, I guess kind of the same thing as serving, really, because they come from
yeah.
the same place. So if you can
Yeah.
really pour that out,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, that has served me many times
Oh, I
where
like that.
I might look at someone and on the surface be like, okay, I don't agree with this, or
Mhm.
you know, but okay, I can see there's beauty here. You know, I
Yes.
really see that there's beauty here somehow, and I will be happier if I can see
Yeah.
you. You
Yeah. I really like that. I'm gonna write that one down too. That's
know?
yeah, it just gets broader and broader and broader.
Hmm.
You know, all of these keynotes.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I'd love to ask you 2 more questions if you've
Okay.
got time.
Yes.
One, I keep wanting to go back to, just because we kind of left everyone hanging with, we were talking about the worthiness piece, and I'd love to like really wrap that up in case there's anybody out there who's like, but wait, I struggle with worthiness. Like, how do I
Right.
analyze this?
Right.
So yeah, I'd just love to hear like what have been some of the ways that you've worked
Mhm.
with that throughout your life, you know, and bought some peace. Obviously, it's still a thing that gets pinged, you
Uh-huh.
know. And if you're like me, like it feels like we have this in common where it's like, yeah, gosh, but it's so much less painful than it used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's yeah, but still that shadow of reminding myself. Thank you for bringing us back there. So it kind of coincides with me like really recognizing what was beautiful that I gained in my faith part of Christianity and bringing that with me.
I love
I talked about briefly my divorce with my first husband, and Capri was just a baby. And there's still pieces of that story that I'm careful, because it's Capri's story too, you know. So but I can share it was really bad. And it was the kind of situation where, if we look at Gene Key 7 and who is kind of guiding me from that place of division and manipulating, like it's like that kind of thing, a manipulative shadow.
Yeah.
I'm very repressed in my shadow, and so I attract people who are in their dominant shadow state. So coming out of that, I felt like just bottom. I had like such fight or flight energy. The only thing that was so beautiful in my life was my daughter. And then this like budding thing about like finding purpose that I felt was spoken to me through the Bible. Like that was like it was like words of affirmation for a words of affirmation girl, of like, I am worthy. I am enough. Like I am free. I am like all the things. I really took it in of like, this is God's design for me. And I'll kind of cut to today what I realized too. It's still just putting power beyond myself. It's placing that on God and not truly anchoring it in myself. Because as I came through and felt like passionate about the word of God and like everything and purpose and my purpose, but I was still noticing like, but why is there still this underlying, like, I know my deepest shadow is not healed yet. And I was trying to understand that piece. And that's when kind of looking at neuromanifestation and really working on my subconscious. And I believe like God was showing me this work of like your brain, like all these things are so deeply programmed into you, and we have tools that can help. So I started doing like really deep inner child work. And I'm telling you, like the Venus sequence was last because I was like, I don't know if I can go there yet, because I learned that it goes through your childhood. And it was like painful. And I knew there was a lot of things I blocked, and I just didn't want to go there. But I did a lot of inner child like manifestation. And I mentioned TBM when we talked for my podcast, and she calls them DIs, like deep imaginings, and she has all these different ones, but there is this unblocked inner child one. And I just started just doing it and kind of letting all the emotions happen. And then it came to where I loved doing it. I loved being with her. I loved like reimagining scenes where she was fully supported and like deeply held. Because even though like I could think that I was in my mind, but I knew there was something deeper that I needed to heal. So it's still a process. And I think for you and I both, that being kind of undefined, it's not going to be consistent for us. It is a place we kind of have to continue to work at and be mindful of who's around us, because we absorb that in, because it's not consistent for us. So if like somebody else's energy is like trying to manipulate us or take us somewhere else, we'll be like, okay. Or like trying to prove ourselves, or like, and that's just like, yeah. And it's just like really anchoring in, like we have nothing to prove.
Yeah. That is the thing, is like really coming back to, I don't actually have to earn my existence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have to remind myself of that sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like, actually, even though I am, I've got the 6 and I've got the 4, and there's like this service thing, and you have it as well, that can so easily switch into, well, like, that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I'm not worthy unless I'm doing that thing. And so for me, that's there's that continual flipping back to like, okay, I get to go do this, and I desire to do this, and this is beautiful, and I get to breathe and be just because I exist.
Right. Right.
And I think that I love how you spoke to that, of like grounding it back into your own existence, and then connecting to something bigger than yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would love to, like, given all of this, if you could just like wrap it up in a bow.
Yeah.
because we've gone into a lot of different rabbit trails and a lot of
Yeah.
different, we really gave people, I feel like, a beautiful discussion where we wove in a lot of these tools.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if you could summarize it, like, how do these systems, like, hopefully everyone that's watching just witnessed the self awareness that we have because of them. But I'd
Right.
love it if you could kind of just share,
Mm-hmm.
like, the 1-2 of like,
Yeah. So the way that I use it and to help other people.
yes,
Yeah. So I do love starting with human design just to understand your strategy and authority and like how you're able to like make decisions. Cause I think that's where people get stuck very often.
mhm,
So just having clarity in that, and that right there, if you do nothing else, that just builds trust in your own self,
yeah,
your own authority to move forward. And then in human design, I like, doing the centers and like knowing where you're open and what's consistent for you. So I do touch on those. And then in human design, when it gets to the gates, that's when I switch to the gene keys.
oh, I love that. Okay.
Yeah. And so with the gene keys, it's so personal. In business, usually people are wanting, I love working with people who really want to refine their branding and not visually. I can do that too, but it's more about your messaging
Mhm.
and in your brand. It's like your life's work and ends in the brand. It's really how the quality of your voice and
Mm,
your expression. So your brand expression, having everything consistent and shining your message out in a
mhm.
way, and like going through the prosperity sequence, like attracting your fractals. Like it's not just about who you're meant to serve, but also like your masterminds, like people in your business, like all of those people. It's like creating this whole community.
Mm.
So I like working through that one in like a one-on-one coaching container. But then for readings, I can just kind of do an overview of all of that
Yeah.
and different sequences. And it's so individual that I love to hear where people are and let that guide.
Yeah. That's so powerful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This really feels like such a beautiful way to illustrate these two systems and your
Mhm.
work.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I mean, the whole reason this podcast exists is really to teach people. I call it an alchemical life.
Hmm.
It is about liberating ourselves from those subconscious programs that you were just talking about. And these systems like really beautifully uncover those
Uh-huh.
and allow them to be seen. And once they're uncovered and seen, the work is almost done,
Yeah.
because once you bring it into the light, that's why we call them shadows.
Right. And I remember now what I was going to say before when you were talking about this, like in service of, and it's almost like this realization, which you have in your chart too, of like everyone has it in their chart actually, but it's like that at the end of the day, we are all one. So anything that I do in service of myself is in service to you,
Mhm.
and vice versa. Anything I do for you is in turn in service of myself. So it's kind of like you start not thinking about self really.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
it's just like using your gifts in this way of like communal whole and uplifting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true abundance to me. And when I feel those moments when I feel myself trusting the universe, God,
Hmm.
the way that it's all set up
Hmm.
enough to just freely give and use and flow in my gifts without
Yeah.
even thinking about like what's going to come back.
Right.
And that's when I feel the most alive,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And then it always ends up working out somehow.
Yeah. And it always does come back like
Yeah.
tenfold. It just does. And then that you're filled up to give more away. And like that's like the spiral that goes up.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was it. That was such a perfect way to end. Thank you.
And scene.
Mic drop. Well, I'm going to link everything below, but can you just tell people like how to find you?
Yes. Thank you. My brand name is Lucy Celebrates. So that's website, Substack, even Instagram if you go there, like all the places. And then my publication on Substack is called The Lightworker's Guide. And that's also the name of my podcast. So, yay.
Amazing. You're such a gem. Thank you so much for this. This
I
is
feel the same.
the most nourishing conversation.
Yeah, I love you. I feel like I could talk to you forever. Like,
Same.
ever. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I hope to meet all of your people and we just become one big community because I love you.
Oh, same. Okay, we'll have to do a part 2.
Okay, then I'm done.
Oh, amazing. All right. We love you, beautiful, magical humans. We will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us. And aloha.
Bye.